Ever since the U.S. and Canadian governments tried to strip Native people of their languages, their cultures, their lifestyles, forcing Native children into residential schools in the 18 and 1900s, Native people have been fighting to build their cultures back. In 1969, the Native North American Traveling College started as a van of activists and educators in Akwasasne, driving from reservation to reservation to teach what it meant to be indigenous. Today, the college has expanded its mission to teaching non-natives too, dispelling cruel myths and sharing the beauty of indigenous culture. The college touched down in North Creek recently for a social dance. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from the St. Lawrence County Community Development Program, now accepting applications for the Head Start program to prepare children ages 3 to 5 for school. Online at slccdp.org/head-start.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Tuesday, September 3rd. First up, a former aide to Governor Kathy Hochul has been arrested. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn says Linda's son was taken into custody Tuesday morning alongside her husband, Christopher Hu. Federal prosecutors say Sun has been charged with acting as an undisclosed agent of the Chinese government. They say Sun blocked representatives of Taiwan from having access to high-level officials in New York State and shaped New York governmental messaging to align with the priorities of China. Her husband, Christopher Hu, is charged with money laundering conspiracy, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, and misuse of means of identification. Hochul's office says Sun was fired in March 2023 after discovering evidence of misconduct. The rides are coming down and the vendors are cleaning up. This year's Great New York State Fair is in the books. It came to an end yesterday. Jessica Kane has more on this year's highlights and challenges for the New York Public News Network.
Hundreds of union workers marched alongside the Expo Center on the last day of this year's New York State Fair. The Labor Day rally and parade wrapped up the 13-day event. And Fair Director Julie Lefebvre is reflecting on her first year in the position.
It's been a roller coaster, but what it's really proven to me is that we have a really great team here who puts the satisfaction, safety, fun, everything front and center for our fairgoer and for our vendors and for our sponsors.
Safety concerns did play a role at this year's fair. After reports of shots being fired, the State Fair shut down early Sunday out of an abundance of caution. State police did not find evidence of any gunshots or injuries, but Lefebvre says fair staff continue to work closely with police, and safety is at the forefront of what they do.
At all points in time, we have cameras everywhere, but we also have a joint operations center. And in that joint operations center, we have a dozen agencies who are monitoring everything from people coming in the gates to social media threats to our artists coming in.
And Lefebvre says this year's run had plenty of high points too, including an emphasis on agriculture.
We had more than 100 sheep on top of last year's number enter our competitions. Same thing with dairy cattle. And that's a huge thing for people, especially for our exhibitors who are in those competitions. It means we're really coming back and we're really bouncing back.
She also says she received positive feedback from families enjoying the fair's sensory-friendly room. But she says after spending months planning the event, she mostly enjoys just seeing the fairgoers.
We get to watch people walk by with a smile, or we heard a little girl jump up to her dad and scream, "This was the greatest day of her life." So that's the greatest reward and thank you that we can receive.
And even though the gates are closed, the work continues. Over the next few weeks and months, State Fair staff members will be sending out surveys to vendors and fairgoers, analyzing this year's fair and deciding how to start preparing for next year. In Syracuse, I'm Jessica Kane for the New York Public News Network.
Indigenous communities have existed in the Adirondacks for thousands of years, but the legacy of colonialism continues to impact the relationship between Native people and non-Natives living in the region today. A group of young Haudenosaunee educators is working to change that narrative by teaching their ancestors' culture through dance. David Escobar has the story.
It's a quiet night in North Creek. That's until you step inside the auditorium at the Tannery Pond Community Center. A crowd of around 30 locals are joining in a rhythmic dance line with Haudenosaunee dancers.
So the first dance we started with is the Standing Quiver.
That's Jacob Waterreason Cook. He's a member of the Native North American Traveling College.
It was a war ritual, and what it did was it kind of blessed all the arrows in the village for the hunters, hoping that when we went out we were able to return with sustenance or food for the village.
The college is in Akwasasne Mohawk territory up near Messina. Its educators travel around the region to share the cultures of the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which has also been called the Iroquois. Traveling college member Grace Cachicho Point says North Creek doesn't feel that different from Akwasasne.
In a way, it still feels like I'm at home because the Mohawk people, our territory actually went all the way to the Adirondacks. So when I come here, it's, I don't know, there's a warm feeling in my heart.
Point says dance performances like today's are a way for her to reconnect with her ancestors' homeland and history, and to teach the people who live here now that Mohawk people and their culture are alive and thriving.
Like I was even told that they were told in elementary school or high school that the Mohawk people went extinct, which we're still here.
Dispelling that myth is just the beginning of the Traveling College's mission. David Fadden says it's also about building lasting connections between Adirondackers and indigenous communities. He's Mohawk and curated the artwork at the Tannery Pond Indigenous Festival.
Well, having these events just even, broadens their knowledge base about indigenous people. Rather than a painting hanging on the wall, you actually meet people and you hear them and you can speak to them.
Fadden says he's optimistic about the ongoing efforts to preserve Haudenosaunee culture. But Tekoroniakwas McDonald says that future can feel tenuous.
There's not many of us that are consistent in staying within the culture. Just because there was a time when our grandparents didn't really pass down those cultures and traditions to their kids, so a lot of us young people now are getting back to that.
Thousands of Native people were forced into residential schools during the 18 and 1900s. It was part of a government effort to remove indigenous children from their homes and deprive them of their Native heritage, language, and culture. Because of that history, the traveling college members say they've lost some of their ancestors' traditions. Point says being a part of the traveling college allows her to celebrate her Mohawk identity with non-natives, like through this dance.
Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves and participating and experiencing what the Haudenosaunee enjoy doing, which is having fun, doing our dances, sharing our experiences, our knowledge, our culture.
Candace Murray watches on as audience members step to the beat of the music. She's the executive director of Tannery Pond. She says this performance is part of a bigger series of indigenous events at the community center.
It would be foolish to assume that they only have one kind of art. We wanted it to be a festival where we showcase a lot of the different aspects of the culture, so actual visual arts and dancing or musical arts.
Cook says there's a growing number of young Haudenosaunee people learning these traditional songs and dances to carry them on. He watches on as his friends give their high-energy rendition of the traditional smoke dance. Cook says it's important that the traveling college use its art to continue passing down indigenous traditions and to educate people, both on and off the reservation in Akwasasne.
It's a really big honor to get out to different places in different areas and share our culture and kind of show people that we are still here. This is who we are. This is our practices. These are our dances. These are how we do it.
Even as tonight's drum beats wind down, Native North American Traveling College members say they'll continue using dance to show their culture is thriving and here to stay. I'm David Escobar, North Country Public Radio in North Creek.
David Escobar comes to us from Report for America. He reports on diversity issues in the Adirondacks through a partnership between North Country Public Radio and Adirondack Explorer. Music today by Tim Ellifritz of Johnsburg and December Wind of Akwasasne. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.